We're in the Gemara on Daf Nutzayin Amud Beis. Okay, the last 3 lines of the Amud. Ella Meyata. The Gemara here is discussing the halacha why, when a woman gets married to a Kayin, only the first stage of marriage, Edison, can she not yet eat truma from her husband? The pasuk says Kinyan Kaspite, so she's already acquired by her husband. So the second opinion of Shmuel but of Yehuda, it said the reason is because we're afraid that when she actually gets married fully to her husband, the husband might discover something that he doesn't like about her, some kind of a mum, and therefore the whole marriage will be a mekach, and therefore it'll turn out that she wasn't allowed to eat any truma. That was the svar of the Gemara. So the Gemara now asks on this: Ela meyata, if so, evet koyin shalachai mi Yisrael loylechol betruma mishum simpain. If you have an evet that now belongs to a Kayin, and he acquired this Evet. We're talking over here about a Evet Kanani that was acquired from another Yid. So lelechel betrume mishum simpain. He also should not be allowed to eat truma because you should be concerned that maybe there's some kind of a mum that you'll discover, and it'll turn out that the whole sale is a mekach. So the Gemara now says, Simpain ba'avodim leka. No, when it comes to an Evet, this concern that there'll be a mum, there's nothing. There's no concern for this. Why? The avroi, if there's any kind of a blemish, some kind of, he has a broken leg or anything else that he's not functional, so this is something that you could see externally, so the buyer, the Kayin, sees this openly, clearly, so we're not concerned that he's going to find out about this later. Vide gavoi, if it's some kind of a mum that there is internally, but it doesn't affect him in any way. L'malacha kaboi, so he needs this evet just to work for him. If he has any mum that's anywhere in his body, in a private place, why should it matter to the master, to the kayin, that he just needs him for work? How about other things that he may find out about this Evet? Nimtze ganev okovyustus. How about if you find out that this Evet is a thief or is a kovyustus? Kovyustus, Rashi says, means he kidnaps. He's a kidnapper. So says Rashi. Says the Gemara. Higiyai. This sale nevertheless takes effect. It's not going to be considered a mekach tos. And Rashi says the reason it's not a mekach tos is because this is something that's to be expected. These Avadim Kananim are, this is their nature. She says, Staman Ganavime. Most of them are thieves, so therefore it's not a surprise, and the sale still is in effect. Sorry. Where am I over here? My ikke. What is the concern that may be still something that you may discover? That it'll be a mekach tos, list mezuyin, something that's very uncommon, that it turns out that this Evet is a list mezuyin. He's an armed robber. It's something which is not common, and this will be considered to be a mekach tos. Or it turns out that this is an individual that the king or the government is looking for him, and they're looking to kill him. And so you bought somebody that they're going to find him and they're going to kill him. So this is something which is not something you could have expected, not something which is common. So if you find out this is true, it's a mekach tos. Says the Gemara, but if this is a person that's an armed robber, or somebody that the king is looking to kill him, this is something that there's a rumor about this. Everybody should know about this. Rashi says what the Gemara means to say is, so you must have known about it as well. And if you knew about it, then you still bought him as an Eved, so then you accepted it. Or Taisva says, the Gemara means to say when it says Kal Islahu, that this is something very uncommon. If it happens, everybody knows about it. And over here, if nobody knows about it, so then we're not going to be concerned about such a thing. We're not going to say he can't eat truma because maybe it's going to turn out that he's an armed robber. Why are we going to be chayshish for such uncommon things? Okay, so therefore, this answers the question why by an Eved we're not concerned that it might be a mekach tos. So now the Gemara goes back to the machlokes we had before regarding why a woman that gets married to her husband and it's only after Edison, not yet the full marriage, she can't eat truma. So again, the first opinion was that the reason is because if she's still living in her father's house, she might share the truma she receives from her husband with her brothers and sisters. The second shot we said is because we're concerned that the marriage may end up being a mekach tos. Says the Gemara, mechti letzi, bein lamat, according to both opinions, loy achla, when she's still in her father's house by Edison, she cannot eat truma. So my benayo, what is the practical difference between these both opinions? So the Gemara gives 3 cases where there's an afkamina. Ikke benayo, the difference would be kibble. Either the case is that the husband says, clearly, I accept upon myself, I'm so happy to marry this woman, I accept upon myself any blemish she may have, it doesn't matter to me. The marriage should still take effect. So when a person is makabel this, so then we're not any more concerned that there may be a mekachtas. He clearly said that he accepts whatever it is. But if the concern is that she might share from the truma with her brothers and sisters, that's still a concern. Or masar v'halach, or a case where the father, if you remember we had before a Mishnah, where the father gives over his daughter to the shluchim of the father to go bring them to the husband of the father, to the house of the husband, that is. Or halach, the father himself or the shluchim of the father went together with her to the house of the husband, but she didn't arrive yet. Right? So if it's a case of masar v'halach, she already left the father's home. So we're not any more concerned from that point that she's going to share any of the truma with her brothers and sisters in her father's home. But at the same time, though, she didn't arrive yet to her husband's house, and we're still concerned that the husband may discover a mum that will turn the whole marriage into a mekachtos. The whole marriage was never a good marriage. So these are the cases that will be a difference between the two reasons. Going back to the Mishnah. It said in the Mishnah, Rab Tarfon Omer, Neisnin la hakoil truma v'cholo. Tarfon says that when a kohen feeds his wife the truma, so he can give her all the food that he feeds her. All of it could be truma, but there was another opinion in the Mishnah that said he doesn't give her all of it truma, he gives her half truma and half chulin. The reason is because this woman, his wife, could be sometimes tameh, she becomes a nida, and she can't eat the truma all the time. So how could he give her truma for all of her food? He has to give her some food that she eats truma, but also some chulin that she'll be able to use in times that she's tameh. Amar Abaye, so Abaye says, Machloikis, the argument about this is only in specific cases. But bas kohen lekohen. When it's a bas kohen that's getting married to a kohen, so over here, Rab Tarfon argues and says that you can give the bas kohen all truma. And the reason is because a bas kohen grew up in the house of kohenim, and therefore she's accustomed to this, and therefore she's able to take care of matters and to know what to do when she's tameh, that she's not allowed to eat this food. And what is she going to do? She's going to get this food which is truma, she's going to have to sell it to someone else, and then buy herself chulin. So because she's a bas kohen, so she's accustomed to this. Avol bas Yisrael, if she's a bas Yisrael, the kohen that's getting married to a kohen divri akoil, everybody would agree mechza chulin or mechza truma, that the husband, the kohen, has to give her half chulin, half truma, so that when the times when she's tameh, she should be able to eat her chulin. Another detail, Abaye says, machloikes barusa. Even this that we said, that we're talking only about a bas kohen, besides the fact that we're only talking about a bas kohen here, it also is a bas kohen only after edison, the first stage of marriage. Aval b'nesua divrei hakoil mechza chulin or mechza truma. In the time of Edison, since she's still in her father's house, so in her father's house, her father will take care of her. And if she's getting all truma food, and she's going to become tameh, and she can't eat it in the times of tumah, so her father is going to take care of her. Her father is going to go and sell that truma for her to be able to, she should have chulin to eat. Aval b'nesua, if it's already the time of nisuin, meaning that this is after the time arrived that she's supposed to be married, and her husband is feeding her already. As we learned before, from the time when it arrived when she's supposed to be married, her husband feeds her. She's not in her father's house anymore. She's living alone in a place out of her father's house, and the husband is giving her already the truma. Here, even Rab Tarfon will agree that you have to give her half chol and half truma. Who's going to take care of her in the time when she's tameh and she can't eat the truma? Who's going to sell for her this truma to be able to get chulin? So in such a time period, even Rab Tarfon would agree that you have to give her half chulin. Tanya Nami Achi, these 2 points that Abaye here said about Rab Tarfon's opinion, we learned this in the Braisa. Rab Tarfon, so first the Braisa brings the opinion of Rab Tarfon as it says in our Mishnah. Rab Tarfon says, Noisim la akoil truma. You can give her all truma. Rabbi Kiva argues, mechza chulin and mechza truma. You have to give her half chulin, half truma for the times that she's going to be tameh. Now the Braisa explains, according to Rab Tarfon's opinion, when could you give her all truma? B'bas kohen lekohen. If she's coming from a house of a kohen, she's a daughter of a kohen, and she's getting married to a kohen. So then you can give her all truma. She'll know she's accustomed to this from her house to know that she shouldn't touch it when she's tameh. But if she's a bas Yisrael getting married to a kohen divrei hakoil mechza chulin mechza truma, everybody would agree. Rab Tarfon would agree. You have to give her half chulin and half truma. The second point that Abaye says is here the Braisa as well. When do you say you can give her all truma if she's still in arusa, so her father will take care of this for her? But if it came time for her to be married and she's not living with her father anymore, then everybody would agree that you have to give her half chulin and half truma. Now this brisa continues here and brings another few opinions regarding what you give this woman getting married to a kain. Rabbi Yehuda ben Pseida says, "Neisnon law shtei yadis shel truma va'achas shel chulin." You give her 2/3 truma and 1/3 chulin. So you don't have to divide it half and half, but you can give her 2/3 truma. Rabbi Yehuda says, "Neisnon law hakol truma." You give her all truma v'hi meicheres, and she has to sell this truma v'leikachas b'domim chulin. And then with the money that she gets for the truma that she sells, she will get chulin to eat. So Rashi explains, it seems like Rabbi Yehuda's opinion is the exact same as Rab Tarfon. Rab Tarfon also said you can give her all truma, and then she'll have to sell that truma to buy herself chulin. But Rashi explains, Rabbi Yehuda is adding and saying that when you sell truma, the price of selling truma is much cheaper than selling chulin, because chulin is something that everybody could eat. So there's much more people that are looking to buy it. Truma, only kainim could eat, so the price is going to be much lower. So when you're going to give her truma and you're keeping in mind that she's now going to have to also sometimes sell her truma to buy chulin, according to Rabbi Yehuda, you're going to have to give her enough truma that she'll be able to get the value for her money that she needs to be able to buy chulin. That's the addition of Rabbi Yehuda.
Doesn't agree with that?
No. Yeah, interesting. Anachanam, even though it's a Rab Tarfon holds, you give her truma, and she might have a certain loss with the truma that she has to sell, but it doesn't matter.
You have your little girl selling this.
Rab Shimon ben Gamliel says, "Kol makayim shehuskara truma." Wherever we say over here that you have to give her truma, or you can give her all truma, neisnon lo kiflayim b'chulin. You have to give her double the amount of truma than the amount of chulin that you're giving her. So now the Gemara explains, what does this mean? My beinayu. What's the difference between Rab Shimon ben Gamliel and what Rabbi Yehuda said before? Right, so he says you have to give double the amount. So Rabbi Yehuda is also saying that you have to give extra truma in order to be able to sell it to get the right price for the chulin. So what does it mean, the double that he said? Ikke beinayu, the difference is tirche. The tircha that there is, it's not only that the price for the truma is less than what you're going to get for the chulin, but it's something else. It's going to take you much longer to sell enough truma to be able to get that price for that you need for the chulin. There's much less buyers. You're going to have to wait a much longer period of time. You're going to have to work much harder to sell truma in order to get what you need for your chulin. So he has to give her so much chulin, so much truma that is. He has to give her so much truma that she should avoid the tircha. She has such an abundance of truma that she'll easily find enough people to be able to buy this truma, even to avoid the tircha that there is in selling enough to be able to get chulin. That's the difference over here. So basically, there are three opinions regarding the truma. Rab Tarfon says, just give her the truma as is, and she'll have to deal with whatever loss there will be in this. Rabbi Yehuda says you have to compensate for that loss and give her extra. And Rab Tarfon says you have to give her so much even to compensate for the tircha that's involved in selling this truma. Going back to the Mishnah, it said, Hayavam eina meichel b'truma. That when you had a woman that was married to a kayin and her husband passed away, and now she's waiting to get married to the brother, like the din of Yibum. So, but then she does not eat any truma for the fact that she's waiting to get married to this kayin. My timer, what's the reason? Kinyin kaspa yom rachmana. The Torah says that the reason why the wife eats truma because the husband acquires her. Over here, she's really the kinyan of the brother. The brother is the one that was Makadish her and passed away, and now she's waiting for Yibum, but she's not the kinyan of this person yet. So therefore, there's no tromer in Atayra. Ashi holds that this is a drasha in Atayra. I believe Tosfos says that this drasha here is really only an asmachta, but really in Atayra she would eat tromer. It's at the drasha midrabanan. Then the Mishnah said, if 6 months she was waiting to get married to her husband, and then her husband died, and now she's waiting 6 months to get married to her yavam, so she doesn't need truma. And then the Mishnah goes on, if she waited 12 months to get married to her husband, besides 1 day that she now waits to get married to her yavam, her husband died a day before she was supposed to get married, or in the reverse, she waited 1 day to get married to her husband, and now she's waiting 12 months to get married to her husband, to her yavam, that is. So the Gemara asks, why does the Mishnah bring all these examples? If you already told me that even though she waited to get married in front of her husband, which was the original person that acquired her, but you said still she cannot eat truma, if she waited almost all the 12 months in front of this yavam, needless to say that she should not be allowed to eat the truma because she's not the kinyan kaspa of the yavam. She's not really acquired by the yavam yet. Why does the Mishnah have to add this example? The Gemara answers, you're right. There's no additional chiddush here. Zu ve'ein tzarich loyma zu ketani. Sometimes the Mishnah starts with the bigger chiddush first, and then it says other scenarios. Needless to say, even another case, and needless to say, even a less of a chiddush. Even though this is a little bit of a deichik, and the Gemara tries to stay away from such an answer, but sometimes this is the style of the Tana and the Mishnah. Then the Mishnah said, Zu Mishnah Rishaina. In the Mishnah Rishaina, in the beginning, the Bezdin would paskin that once the date for the marriage arrived, even if they didn't actually get married, from that time forward, the husband Akayin could feed a truma. And then the Mishnah said, but the later generations, they paskin differently. They said she can't eat truma until she actually gets married. Says the Gemara, my time, what's the reason for this? Amar Ula, so Ula said, V'tayim Rav Shmuel bar Yehuda, Mishum Simpain. The reason is, based on what we learned before, because if the whole concern over here why she can't yet eat truma until she's fully married is because the husband might discover something that will annul the whole marriage, so then even if the time for marriage arrived, but if she's not actually married to him, we're still concerned that the husband might discover something that he doesn't like and it'll nullify the marriage. So the Gemara says, going back to what we learned before, the two opinions, why a woman that's married, the first stage of marriage, does not eat truma when she's still in the father's house. So this is understood according to Ula's opinion. Kamaise, the psak, the halacha, that it was in the beginning. So then they said that once the date for marriage arrives, she could eat truma. Why did they paskin this way? Because they held that the reason she can't eat truma yet is neshama yimzugu lakais bevesavia. Reason is because when she's still living in the father's house, so then she might pour a cup of wine that she got from truma and share it and feed it to her brothers and sisters. And therefore, once the date of marriage arrives, as we learned before, what happens is she doesn't live anymore with the parents. What happens is she moves out and the husband will feed her and give her in a separate place. So that's not a concern anymore. Ubasraisa, then the later Bezdin, that paskin that she still can't eat truma, Mishum Simfain. The later Bezdin held that the reason is that there's still a problem that the whole marriage might be nullified. The husband might discover something that he doesn't like. So that's why until the actual marriage she can't eat. So that's understood. But according to Rav Shmuel bar Yehuda's opinion, Rav Shmuel bar Yehuda before, as we learned, said, Kamaisa mishum simpain. This was always the reason. Even in the beginning, the only reason why she can't eat truma until she's fully married is because the husband might discover something that will nullify the marriage. Ubasrais mishum simpain. And the later Bezdin, the reason is also only because of the same reason that they might discover. So my binayu. What is the difference? Why earlier did they paskin that once the date of the marriage arrives, she can eat truma, and then later they changed and said that she still can't? So the Gemara explains, the difference between the two halachas, that the way they paskin that is, bedikas chutz. Do we say that the husband relies on somebody else, a relative, somebody else checking out his wife, making sure that he's going to be interested in marrying her? So the first Bezdin, the earlier generations, they held that you could rely on a relative that will check her out, and therefore if the date of marriage arrived, he already made sure to inspect the matter, and he knows that he relies on the fact that he can marry her, and we're not afraid for anything to come up that will nullify the marriage. But the later generations held, you can't rely on a relative inspecting for him, and therefore it still might be something that will nullify the marriage, and therefore she can't eat truma until she's actually fully married to him. Zog the Heilige Mishnah. Hamaktish. So this Mishnah actually begins the halachas of the obligations that a husband has to the wife, the obligations that the wife has to the husband, which will be over here in the continuation of this Pedic. But the Mishnah begins with this halachas in a very interesting way by discussing what happens if a husband will be maktish. He will say, I'm dedicating to hektish those things that my wife works and that she does for me. So he's dedicating it to hektish. Does he have the power to do that? So the Mishnah says, Hamaktish ma'aseh yedei ishtay. A person says, I consecrate to hektish the work that my wife works that belongs to the husband. This will be a Mishnah later that will work, that the Mishnah will teach us that there are certain things that the woman has to work for her husband. The Mishnah says that she has to weave and spin and with thread, and certain thing that she's obligated to do for her husband. So she does these things for her husband, and the husband says that all this should be dedicated to hektish. So the Mishnah says, Hareizu oisa v'oicheles. So the hektish does not take effect. The wife will do these things, the work that she does, v'oicheles, and she can eat it and she can keep it for herself actually. Even though usually this is supposed to go to the husband, but nevertheless it does not go to the husband, and therefore he cannot be maktish this. Now why not? If this is something that she does for the husband, so it really belongs to the husband, so he should have the right to dedicate it to hektish. The Gemara will explain. We'll see. Hamaisar, now, besides those things that she's obligated to do for her husband, the work that she does for her husband, the needlework or the thread or the spinning and different things, as we'll see in the Mishnah later, but there's also meiser, there's a surplus, there's things that she does which are extra. And the Mishnah there will actually tell us that even those things that are a surplus also go to the husband. And the reason is as follows. The way it works is, the husband is supposed to feed his wife, as we've learned so many times before, mezainis, he feeds her, and in return, she gives him ma'asiyah, the work that she does, she gives him. And there's a certain set amount of work that she has to do for him because of the fact that the husband feeds her. But then there's ma'aseh, there's a certain surplus. Even that surplus also goes to the husband. And the reason is because besides the mezainis that a husband is supposed to give for his wife, he's also supposed to give her a ma kesef. He's supposed to give her a certain amount of spending money in return for this surplus that she gives him. So now, this Maisa, if the husband will want to dedicate the Maisa to Hektish, so Rab Meir says, Hektish, that it will take effect and it will be Hektish. Rab Yechanan Asandla Chulin. Rab Yechanan Asandla says, it will not take effect, it will remain Chulin. So again, the Gemara will explain this, machlekes here, why should it take effect, why should it not take effect. Seemingly, this surplus is also something that the husband gets in return for the fact that he gives her spending money. We'll see in the Gemara. But the Gemara first starts, to explain the Mishnah, the Gemara first starts with a basic halacha, which we also had already before, I think. The negate to the obligations from the husband to the wife. So Amar Rav Huna says, Amar Rav, in the name of Rav, Yechayli shalem alabayla. A wife could say to her husband, Eini nizainis, I don't need to get fed from you, ve'eni yoisa, and I'm not going to work for you in exchange. So she doesn't need this arrangement. She's self-sufficient. She'll take care of herself. She's allowed to say this. So the Gemara explains, what's the basis of this? Kosavar. So this means that Rav Huna held, when the Chachamim made this institution that she works for him and he gives her instead the mezainis, really the main point of this whole takana was for her benefit, that she should have a source to be fed from. We're concerned that she won't have it to be fed from. So that was the main takana. And then they said additionally, the fact that her income, that her work goes to the husband, that was Mishum Eva. Since the husband is the one that's feeding her, he's giving her all the food, and now she's working for herself. So if she would be keeping all of her money for herself, the husband is going to feel like she's working and keeping all her money for herself, and I'm feeding her everything. So in order for not to be any animosity between husband and wife, they additionally were masaking that she should give her Ma'aseh Yadayim to the husband. But the main point is all for the mezainis. That was the main purpose here. So therefore, so if she says, you know what, forget it, I don't need you to feed me, and therefore my work is not going to be yours. She can go ahead and do this. Meisvei, on this the Gemara asks, but Braisa seems to say the exact opposite. The Braisa says, Tiknu mizaynais tachas ma'asiyada. The Braisa says that Chachamim instituted that the mizaynis that the wife gets is instead of the fact that she gives him her work. So from the way the Braisa puts it, it seems like that really ma'asiyada is the main point, that the husband deserves to get his wife's income. Since he's taking all of her income, so they instituted that she should have where to eat from. So therefore they said that she should get the mezainis instead. So if so, she can't come and say that she's not interested in this arrangement. Adarabah, the main point is all the fact that the husband deserves to get her income. So how could she stop this arrangement? Gemara says, you're right, you're going to have to switch to Braisa here, according to Rav Huna. Aim is say, Tiknu Maisa Yadel, Tachas Mezainis. They instituted that he gets her income instead of the fact that he feeds her. The main point is the fact that he feeds her, and then because of this, he has to give her income. So it's really all, the wife has the control of it. She can decide and say, I don't need your Mezainis, and I'm going to work for myself. Says the Gemara, so now, let's go back to our Mishnah. From our Mishnah, it seems like we have a proof to what Rav Huna said. Because the Mishnah said, Hamakdish Maisi de Ishtoi, a person says that all the work of my wife should be dedicated for Hektish, Harehi Oise Vaycheles. So she works for herself and she keeps and she eats everything for herself. So what do we see over here? That the Hektish of the husband does not take effect. Why does it not take effect? My love, Binizainis. Don't you think the case over here is that the husband has money and he wants to feed his wife, and nevertheless, the wife says, I'm not interested in you feeding me, I'll take care of myself, and you keep your food for yourself. And therefore, her work that the husband wants to be makdish will not take effect, because she wants to keep her work for herself. So in our Mishnah, we clearly see this concept, that she can keep her work for herself. Says the Gemara Loi. That's not necessarily what the case of our Mishnah is. Rather, what our Mishnah is speaking about, that the husband doesn't have any money. He doesn't have any money to feed her. And that's why she's keeping the income for herself. Not because the husband is not feeding her at all. Fragt the Gemara, if that's the case of our Mishnah, if the Mishnah is saying here, this halacha, that the husband is just not feeding her, so Maila Memra, what's the chiddush of our Mishnah that she can keep her work for herself to feed herself? Of course she can. Not even, which is something we had before. The Gemara discusses other cases where a person has an obligation to feed. So this is a case of an Evet Kanani, or Evet Ivri, where a person has to feed them as well. So now there's an argument about this regarding feeding an Evet Kanani. There's an opinion that says when it comes to an Evet Kanani, a person could say that you're going to work for me, but I'm not feeding you. You have to go and figure out yourself how you're going to feed yourself. A person is allowed to do this when it comes to an Evet Kanani. But Hanimili Bevet Kanani, that's only by an Evet Kanani, like Siv Be'imach. It doesn't say within the Torah the word imach, that you have to treat him like yourself, so you're allowed to tell him that you should feed yourself. Aval Evet Divri Dechsiv Be'imach, by an Evet Divri, where the Torah says that he has to be with you like you, so you're not allowed to do this. You can't tell him, work for me and I'm not going to feed you. So the Gemara now adds, V'kol shekein ishtoi. Most definitely it comes to a wife, a person can't tell his wife, I'm sorry, I can't afford it, I can't feed you, but still all your work should be mine. So what's the chiddush of our Mishnah? The Mishnah is saying of a person that's being makdish the work of his wife in a case where he's not even offering to feed her, that she can keep her income and the hektish doesn't take effect. Of course not. He's not even offering to feed her. He says he can't afford it. Why would I think that the hektish should take effect? So the Gemara explains, you're right, according to this pshat, the beginning of the Mishnah is no chiddush at all. Seife itzrichle, it's the second part of the Mishnah where there's the chiddush there. In the second part of the Mishnah, where it spoke about Maisa, the surplus of her work, so there, Rab Meir says that when the husband says that I'm being makdish that, so the hektish does take effect. Rab Yochanan Sandla says that it does not take effect, and the Gemara will soon explain exactly what this machlekes is about, and there is a chiddush. That was the main chiddush of the Mishnah. But in the first part of the Mishnah, there's taka no chiddush. This is an obvious thing, that if the husband is not feeding her, so for sure all of her work belongs to herself, and the husband cannot go ahead and be makdish it. Imagine such a thing, such a cruel husband. He doesn't feed her, and not only that, whatever work he's makdish, he says goes to hektish. So that's obvious. Now the Gemara says, "Opliege the Rish Lakish." The pshat that Rav Huna Marav said over here in the Mishnah. So this is arguing on Rish Lakish. The Omer Rish Lakish, because Rish Lakish said, "Loi taime the Rab Meir." Don't explain that the reason of Rab Meir's opinion here is that a person could be makdish something that's not here existing in the world yet. So this is referring to the second part of the Mishnah, right? It said in the second part of the Mishnah that the surplus of what a wife works, which also really belongs to the husband. Because like I said before, even the surplus that she is working that's more than her mezainis belongs to the husband, because the husband gives her spending money. Right, so, but there, Rab Meir says that the hektish, that the husband is makdish, takes effect. Now, why does it take effect? This surplus that she works is not in existence yet. Did she work yet? Does that income exist yet in the world? It doesn't exist yet. So do not say that the reason for Rab Meir's opinion, how a husband has the ability to be makdish, to dedicate the hektish, something that doesn't even exist in the world yet, is because Rab Meir holds that a person can dedicate the hektish, something that does not exist in the world yet. No, that's impossible. Just like you can't sell or buy something that doesn't exist in the world yet, so too this surplus of his wife's work that does not exist yet, really he should not have the ability to be makdish this. Ella rather, the reason why a husband could be makdish, this surplus of his wife that belongs to him, is because this is something that she does not have any control over to decide if she's interested in this arrangement. He has the right over this. The husband could force her and say, you must work for me and I will feed you. And you must give me the surplus and I will give you spending money. So therefore, because it's all in the husband's control, so therefore when he's saying that he's being makdish, her work and even the surplus of her work, so it's like he's saying, that it's not the income that I'm being makdish to hektish, I'm being makdish your hands, the ability in your hands to create this income. That's what I'm being makdish to hektish. So the hands that are going to work are here in the world already. That's not a davasholi bal olam. That's something that's here in the world, and therefore the person has the ability to be makdish this. But what's the point that you see over here from Rish Lakish? That he's arguing with Rav Huna. Rav Huna said the wife has the control. She could decide if she wants to get fed from the husband or not. Rish Lakish is saying, no, it's the husband that has the control. And therefore when he's being makdish, her work and her surplus, the point is that he has the control. He can force her and say, you must work for me. And therefore he's being makdish, her hands. It's a Davar Shabbat Olam, exactly. It's here already. So the Gemara asks on this, but how could we interpret his words this way? What did the man say? That's not what he said. He didn't say, I'm being makdish your hands to hektish. He said, I'm being makdish your work to hektish. So the Gemara explains, even the Shamin and Rab Meir. But now there's another point that Rab Meir, what he says here is based on, because we heard Rab Meir said elsewhere. The Amar Rab Meir says, when a person speaks and says something, so if he says something that's not going to work, so we say that a person did not say his words for nothing, and therefore over here as well, when a person says, I'm being makdish your income to hektish, those words make no sense. The income is not even here yet. So therefore we say that he didn't speak for nothing, and what he meant to say is, he meant to say that your work, that your hands that are working, that is, should become dedicated to hektish, and therefore that is a davar shabbat olam. So the point is, Rab Meir's opinion here in the Mishnah is based on three different points. It's based on, number one, the fact that a husband could force his wife to work for him. Number two, it's based on the fact that what he's saying is that the hands are being dedicated to hektish, and that's here. And number three, because we know a person is not saying things for nothing, so that's how we could assume that that's what he meant to say, that the hands should be kaddish and not the work, which is not even here yet. Now, the Gemara asks on this. So one of the points we're saying here is that Rab Meir's opinion is that when there's something that's loy bala olam, it's not here in the world yet, you can't sell it, you can't buy it, you can't give it to hektish. So, fact the Gemara, is that true? V'savar Rab Meir. Does Rab Meir hold Eino the makdish davar shalei bala olam, that a person cannot dedicate to hektish something that's not here in the world yet? But for Tanya, we learned in the Braisa. A person says to a woman, you're going to be married to me when? After I become a ger. So this person is a guy. And he's telling his wife, after I become a ger, you'll be married to me. Or he's telling a woman that's not even a Jew yet, after you'll become a ger, that's when you'll be married to me. Or after I will be freed. This person is still a Evet Kanani, and he says, after I'll be freed and I'll be a full Yid, then I'll be married to you. Or after you'll be freed, then I'll be married to you. Or he says to a woman, which is actually married to somebody else, after your husband dies, or after your sister dies. You can't marry two sisters. So he says, when she's still alive, after the sister passes away, then I'll marry you. Or after Yavama will give you chalitza, then I will marry you. What does Rab Meir say? Rab Meir Omer Mikudeshes. Says Rab Meir, in all these cases the Kiddushin takes effect. So what do you see over here? Rab Meir's opinion in all these cases is that even if it's a davar shalei bala olam, in the current situation, this whole marriage is impossible. Nevertheless, you could say that the marriage should take effect, and it'll take effect in the future. You could be Makadisher, and it'll take effect then. So answers the Gemara, you're right, mi'ahin. From that case, you can clearly see that this is Rab Meir's opinion. But miha lekal mishma mino. However, from our case over here, in our Mishnah, that it says that a person could dedicate the work of his wife to hektish, from here you won't be able to prove it. Because over here you could say what he meant to say is her hands are being dedicated to hektish. So here it's not a davar shalei bala olam. But over there, in that case, by Kiddushin, it's certainly a davar shalei bala olam, and Rab Meir's opinion is that you could have a Kiddushin even in a case where it's loy bala olam, she's not even a Jew yet. Taisus actually, though, does point out that case of the davar shalei bala olam that Rab Meir says there is not exactly the same like a davar shalei bala olam over here. Over here, you're talking about the work that's pashut not in existence in the world at all. Over there, this woman is here. She's here in the world. She's just not a Jew yet, but she is here in the world. So it's a little bit of a lower level of davar shalei bala olam. Okay, let's do one more piece of the Gemara. It said in the Mishnah, Hamaisa Rab Meir hektish. A person is makdish to surplus. So Rab Meir says that then it will become hektish. So here there's two opinions about this. Eimas Kaddish. When will it become hektish? Rav and Shmuel Damri Tavayu. Rav and Shmuel both said, Maisa, this surplus that the husband is makdish and it becomes hektish, la'acha misa Kaddish. That's only after the wife passes away. And now the surplus all goes to the husband. That's when it becomes hektish. The husband yarshins her and it becomes hektish. But in her lifetime, it does not become hektish. Ravada Barava says, Maisar Mechayim Kaddish. This surplus, even when she's alive, even when she's working and she's creating whatever she's making, and the surplus in his lifetime is still going to be hektish. So Rav Papa asks, he's trying to figure out what's the explanation here of this machlekes. B'mai, what are they arguing about? Is the case over here that the husband is giving her, he's feeding her, and he's also giving her spending money, ma kesef. So again, as I explained before, the work of a wife, so it belongs to the husband because he feeds her. The surplus of her work belongs to the husband because he gives her spending money. So if the husband is giving her ma kesef litzrachel, that spending money as well that she needs for those things that she spends on, my time at the mandama la'acham kaddish. So what's the reason of the opinion that says that only after she passes away, then the husband has the ability to be makdish, this surplus, the hektish? It belongs to him. He's giving her spending money, and in return, this surplus does belong to him. He should have the ability to be makdish. Even in the lifetime, yeah. So why only after she passes away do we say he yarshins it from her? So you're gonna have to say the cases over here. The husband's not feeding her; he's not giving her spending money for what she needs. So if so, of course it doesn't belong to him. My time of the mandam mechaim kaddish. So what's the reason of the opinion that says that even in her lifetime it belongs to the husband and it'll be kaddish? So the Gemara answers, the case over here is that the husband is feeding her, and he's not giving her that spending money for her needs. So now, what's the argument over here regarding this surplus, whether it belongs to the husband or not? The argument over here is, what is an exchange of what? Until now, we were assuming that the food is an exchange for the income, and the spending money is an exchange for the surplus of her work. But the Gemara now says, not necessarily. Rav Shmuel's opinion is, Tiknu mizaynis tachas ma'isi yada. It's the food that's instead of her work, and ma kesef tachas ma'isar. And then the spending money is instead of the surplus. And the kivin, the leika yavla ma kesef. So since the case that we're speaking about over here is that the husband is not giving her any spending money, so ma'isar dida have it. So the surplus of her work will belong to her. So that's why who was it over here again? Rav and Shmuel both said that it would only become hektish after she passes away, when the husband will yarshin this. However, Rav Ada Barava's opinion is tiknu mizaynis tachas ma'isar uma kesef tachas ma'isiyadel, that the exchange over here is different. The arrangement is that the mizaynis that he feeds her, that's instead of the surplus. And the ma kesef, the spending money that he gives her, that's instead of her income. So the case over here is that he's not giving her any spending money. He is giving her mezainis. But so v'kivin the yavla mezaini, since he's giving her food, so ma'isar, according to Rav Ada Barava's opinion, the surplus is instead of the mezainis. So did they have it? So therefore it's his. So therefore it will take effect even in her lifetime. Okay, so basically the machlekes over here is what is an exchange of what? Let's just finish the Indian over here. So the Gemara now explains, what is the argument over here regarding what this whole thing? What's in exchange for what? How do we decide this? So Mar Sovar, one opinion is midi d'shchiach, midi d'shchiach. We look at what's common for what's common. Food she needs every day, and her income of the basic work that she does is something that she does all the time. So we say what's common in exchange for what's common. Omar Sava, the other opinion says, midi dekayitz, midi dekayitz. The exchange is something that's a set amount for something which is a set amount. The ma kesef, which is the spending money, is a set amount. Mezainis is not a set amount. And the same thing also when it comes to the when it comes to the maisi yadayim that she has to work for him, that's also a set amount that she has to work. So therefore, we say what's a set amount, that's the exchange over here, and therefore this explains this opinion there.
Okay. All right, 2 questions.